Hello and welcome back. Yes, another season. The season they said couldn't happen. The season many said shouldn't happen of How Money Really Works. It's back for season 2. As ever, I'm Peter Oliver and I'm joined by him.
Stephen Hope. I'm still Stephen Hope. Yes, I'm still here, Peter.
Hello, how you doing?
Hello.
It's been ages.
It has been quite a while. You've been a busy boy.
I've been a busy boy, the world's been a busy boy, and this, dear listener, is where I have to make some confessions. There would have been a much sooner update. In fact, it would have been, the best part of 2 months ago, on everything that's happened since I last spoke to you, dripping in sweat in Macau, about to go and gamble in the casinos there. But yeah, awful lot's happened. We did have us together in Stephen's bar, or I believe for tax purposes it has to be referred to as an subterranean lair.
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily have to say that, Peter, but it does help, yeah.
It does help. Yeah, it's basically a room in the office that they have downstairs that he's turned into a nice bar. Anyway, I had it all set up, looking so beautiful. We looked nice. I could touch him. I did touch him. I touched him a lot. But I didn't mic it up correctly. And so it sounded like I was interviewing Stephen, even though he was right next to me talking to him, and he was coming from the bottom of a well. So I messed that up, ladies and gentlemen. So do not ever doubt the professionalism of this show. It tells you something when it was too bad for me to even put it out. Quite a lot has happened, though. Do we want to do me first or we want to do the world first? Go on, we'll do me. Right, books finished. First one is done. That will be out later this year in the autumn time. It's a collection of, accounts, people's experiences in contemporary China. I'm one of those who's given their account there. As soon as that has a release date or even a pre-sale date, I'll be letting you know here for all of you, the How Money Really Works listeners, to, go and check that out. I'd really appreciate it if you did. We also started the second book, which is about football, Stephen. We like football, don't we?
We do, yeah, and quite a lot this season. We've enjoyed our team this season, haven't we? It's been quite good.
Exactly. And it is about our team. It's about Sunderland AFC. We've spoken to, me and my co-author Graham, spoken to a whole load of former Sunderland players about what it was that made the club, the city, the fan base get under their skin. Some of them spent a long time there. Some of them spent a short time there. They all spent a memorable time at Sunderland AFC. And we've been trying to get their stories, compile them together. That will be available for pre-sale in September and is a must for all of the Sunderland AFC fans in your life for Christmas. Right, I promise I will try and limit those as much as we go on through it, but you can tell it's not going to happen. Pluggity plug, and all of that. Anyway, in the world, a lot has been going on, hasn't it? Donald Trump and Israel deciding they were going to start a little snafu in Iran. And the Gulf of Hormuz, as I believe you were supposed to pronounce it. We don't have the great pronunciations we were trying back in March, where I believe we'd kind of just given up and settled on Strait of Hormuz. And as broad as a Sunderland accent as we could get. All that's happened. We've seen that then have the huge knock-on effect on global markets, global economies, how much it's costing to fill people's cars up. It's having a political impact as well. And we're hearing that, manoeuvres are afoot to oust Keir Starmer as Labour leader and as Prime Minister. Tell you, we leave them for 5 minutes, Stephen. It all goes to pot, doesn't it?
And in amongst all that, I suppose, from our side, How Money Really Works, lots and lots of political things. And as ever with this show, how does that actually affect the man on the street or the man listening on a podcast? And how is it already affected? What might be actually around the corner that doesn't really want to be made public yet in terms of from the political side? How's that going to pan out with your mortgages, all these types of things? So I kind of, that up the now fainted, never to be found again episode downstairs in the Deuce. We did spend a bit of time talking about how
we need to step in there at one moment and say the Deuce is what he calls his pub. Downstairs in the Deuce is going to be that might be one on the Patreon later.
Yes, that will actually. I'll be going behind the paywall.
Late night downstairs in the Deuce.
Yeah, need some disclaimers with that one. But yeah, we did spend a bit of time talking about how that might affect. It was all might. It might affect interest rates. It might affect inflation. Well, in Pete's 2-month hiatus, it has and it is. And it will. So, yeah, that's what we'll be talking about as well.
Yeah. I've got a few questions for you about words that I have to say. Like most news correspondents, I've been seeing a little bit on air, but I don't entirely 100% understand. So we might get into that as well. Don't worry, it's nothing too
Yep.
big. It is becoming more and more important, it would seem, certainly, as we might be heading into a Labour leadership bid and who could be part of that. So, without further ado, I think we do need to say, of course, Stephen, that this is not financial advice and that anything that you hear in this podcast is, well, just for educational purposes. Isn't that right?
That's very true, always true, and always seek out your own financial advisor if anything is of interest. Have a look out there and educate yourself.
Excellent. Plenty to get into. However, let's have a look at how money really works. Well, where to start, but with what's happening in Iran. As we're talking to you right now, in fact, some breaking news coming through from Reuters as we record, saying that Saudi Arabia has launched covert attacks on Iran. That's from Donald Trump as he's spoken to press on board Air Force One as he heads to China to meet with President Xi, where we're expecting that Iran will feature very highly. Of course, this conflict starting back in February, and it's continued. It's ended in this, well, it hasn't ended. It's ended up in this stalemate right now. We've seen huge impacts on fuel costs. Petrol up 20% in the UK, diesel up 36%. The household spend on fuel up 10.4% year on year, and we're currently seeing inflation at 3.3%, with some economists warning that could hit as high as 4% by the end of this year. All of those things a direct result of this conflict in the Middle East, in Iran. Stephen, it's all very concerning. I'm watching it every day because there is a chance I may end up going off to Iran sooner rather than later to try and do some interviews there with their politicians. How concerning, because it is concerning, and people do see this every morning on their breakfast news and their evening news. How concerning is it for the finances of our listeners? What should we be worried about coming down the track, and how can you manage and mitigate the current problems that have already been caused?
As ever, a question to me, Peter, with 15 possible different things to talk about. We'll pick one at a time. Inflation is life getting expensive or more expensive. And so if we're talking about, which everybody's already seen, you've read out the actual stats there, how much it costs to fill a tank in your car, whether it's petrol or whether it's diesel. Although I did hear the other day, it was actually officially cheaper to fill up an electric car, to charge your electric car on the motorway than it would have been to fill the car with petrol. So obviously it was always expensive to charge your car up on a
Pulling off the motorway. Yeah, they were always there.
It was still cheaper to do that than it would be to fill your car up with petrol equivalency. Yeah, so inflation, cost of living. At the beginning of the year, if we can remember back that far, it was going in the right direction, and we were having conversations, especially with clients, about mortgages and interest rates. And actually, inflation seems to be coming under control now. Everybody was taking credit for that as if Keir Starmer was in charge of that, or Rachel Reeves. And then, as you say, this Operation Threat Level Midnight, or whatever it is that
Operation Fist of Justice, or whatever he's calling it these days.
At the end of the day, we're talking about people's lives. But serious things have happened. But for our perspective in the UK, it's the cost of living and the effect on the knock-on effect, other things, in particular borrowing costs as well. Fundamentally, to try to break it down simply is quite hard. But if inflation and the life is getting more expensive, one of the only tools available is the Bank of England increasing interest rates to try to cool the economy down. So when they were thinking maybe one or two cuts to interest rates by the end of the year, we're now maybe looking at one or two interest rate rises.
What is inflation? I know I could go on a TED talk on YouTube and find something out, but I want you to tell me, and the boys and girls listening, what is it, why we care about this number, and how it impacts us.
We'll try slow, right? So inflation, but in and of itself, isn't a bad thing. If you want the economy to grow, you want things to get more expensive slowly, under control. Inflation is life getting more expensive. How much can £10 buy today versus what £10 could have bought 20 years ago versus what will it buy in 10 more years' time. So the cost of future money. So an example I quite often use with clients is the Freddo Index. Remember the
Ooh,
chocolate bars from school?
I like a Freddo.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of a Freddo. You've got me listening. All right.
I'm a fan of a Freddo as much as the next man. So back in the day, you could buy a Freddo bar for 5 pence. That was the
Yep.
going rate. Would you like to hazard a guess, Peter, from your bunker there in Germany? How much do you think a Freddo bar costs today in the UK?
Right. I can remember paying 10 pence for one. So I am going to say 20 pence.
Well, you would have been right in like the exact year that would have been in 2010. It would have been 20 pence. The price today is 35p.
Wow. Okay.
So it's the inflation is the percentage rate at which something's getting more expensive by. Now, the thing when they talk about inflation's under control or not is prices tend not to come back the other way. So when we had the spike back in 2022, Ukraine
Mhm.
war, and that was we all aware of. Oh, we buy a lot of stuff from Ukraine, and gas comes across there. Who would have thought? That was the last time the UK and the rest of the West had a real spike of inflation. A lot of those prices, I don't know if everybody notices, they haven't come back down.
Yeah.
They're now built in. That's like the new normal. So inflation, really simplistically, is how much is life more expensive today than it was exactly 12 months ago. And so when you're saying those numbers at the beginning, it's up 3%. Stuff, a basket of goods, including the Freddo, are 3% more expensive than this time last year. So inflation is the cost of living, life getting more expensive. Did that help? Did it not help?
It
Any more
really
questions?
helps. It really helps. You've explained the how to me. I'm still being thick on the
Question for the
why.
why.
I'm fishing
Right.
for the why. Why,
So
when
move
this number moves, does my Freddo become more expensive?
well, moving swiftly on from specifically just the Freddo, it's all the other things that allow the Freddo to be constructed and made and then transported. So,
Well,
for
I get
example,
that, but I
yeah.
refuse to allow us to move on from the Freddo. We are staying with the Freddo. So, yeah, but so this is my point. I understand that it's, yeah, oh, well, it has to because it costs more. Okay, but and it costs more because we have to manufacture it, transport, and do this with it. But my question is why? Why did it cost more?
Well, some of the reason is profiteering because
Yeah.
we've got to get into all kinds to do with capitalism, etc.
All comes back to capitalism.
Who owns the method, the means of supply and production of Freddos? Is this what we're going? This where we're going now here with this, Peter?
I believe we're starting a campaign to seize a major British chocolate manufacturer, to seize the means of chocolate manufacture, something like that. Right. Okay. So it's a bit of it is this is your go ahead to jack prices up a little bit.
A little bit, but also that's one particular item, right? So there'll be other things that have got cheaper over time. So you can look back at,
Can you tell me something? I
um,
certainly can't think of anything.
well, actually, technology. Technology would be a good example.
Very good. Yeah.
Proportionally speaking, why does everything always go back to 1994 St. Aidan's? I'll try to broaden it out. However, I remember that my dad bought our first computer. It was a 486 DX66. That was the Intel Inside sticker. Beautiful present for Christmas. I think that cost essentially £1,000 in 1994. If you think of what £1,000 could have bought you in 1994 versus what £1,000 could buy you today, actually, you can buy a computer of some description significantly better than the one that we got for like £300, £600. So the inflation monitors all of these different elements, specific items, and the reason for the show today, I suppose, is fuel prices directly affect lots and lots and lots of things because of the transportation costs. So if it costs more money for not just fuel in the tank of your car, but to get the oil from somewhere in a dirty grey tanker, and that's got to get transported across the world, and that costs more money. And then you take it off there to fill up the lorries to drive the things around. That is the effect of inflation, and that is how something all the way over there in the Strait of Hormuz can affect the cost of living over here. The next section on not going to affect with inflation is interest rates. So the Bank of England will say, "Oh, we don't want the economy to overheat and get too much inflation. Let's make life a little. This is all, I always find this counterintuitive, but it works. Let's make life a little bit more expensive to stop people from consuming things. So they use interest rates to actually try to control inflation. Where that really matters for people ends up becoming the price of a car loan, the price of the mortgages, and where at the beginning of this year we might have predicted events, dear boy, events prior to those things happening, that interest rates would have been coming down slightly. They're now pretty sticky, and they might, depending upon how fast we can open up that Strait of Hormuz, they might actually be looking to make interest rate rises. So, yeah, not simplistically, but if the number's higher, your life's more expensive, you got less, your money in your pocket will buy less stuff. That is the effect of inflation.
Well, you mentioned mortgages there and how this could impact people's refinancing their homes or looking to buy a first home even. We will come back to that in just a moment, because before, I want you to fill in more gaps in my ignorance, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, but, sometimes I am. And it's when it comes to bonds, yields, what else is there? Guilt, Stephen. Now, we have talked about it, and we always talk about it. Me and Stephen went to school together at St Aidan's in Sunderland, the Catholic school there. So when it comes to talk of guilt, I'm pretty good with guilt, having gone through a full Catholic education. And an understanding that I just have guilt for everything, but this isn't what that is it? This isn't my own neuroses here.
No, we don't.
Please.
I don't think we've got enough time. I don't think we've got enough time to go into your neuroses, Pete. No.
Oh, it'd be a whole other podcast again on a Patreon behind a paywall, because we would have to. Right, go on then. What are gilt markets? What are bond yields? And why do we care? And why does everybody looking at this right now?
So, the government,
Them lot.
spends more money than they earn.
That'll be right.
In fact, pretty much all governments, but in particular ours in America. So if we wanted to buy something as individuals and we didn't have any money left, what might we do? We might borrow. And that's what a bond is. A bond is, I won't complicate too much because there's something called corporate bond, but we'll stick with this one. It's an IOU from a government.
Okay.
Rachel Reeves says, I want to build some new infrastructure. I want to try not to get too political about what they're borrowing money for. She then goes to, quite literally cap in hand, to the Bank of England and said, I really could do with borrowing, where it's not like our 100,000, 200,000 for a mortgage, it's £1 billion. And I promise I'll pay you the money back. Promise. In 10 years, 15 or 30 years' time. I promise. And so the Bank of England says, okay. And then Rachel Reeves, if I had a piece of paper here, would write I or you. And on that certificate, the Bank of England then sells that to people who think, actually, it's not a bad return. What's the worst that can happen? The UK government might go bust. It hasn't happened yet. So they'll charge an interest rate, a bit of a premium on that. And that's the interest rate. That's the yield, right? Now, if I was to put an example of that, imagine you're going to lend some money to a group of friends. And out with a group of friends, you've got the guy who always pays you back, the guy who's a bit flaky. And so the credit score, the credit worthiness of that individual who you lend the money to might determine how much you choose to charge as interest, right? That's exactly what happens on the bond markets. And they get graded. So you've got the countries who've got the least to worry about and the countries who might have the most to worry about. But put it this way, I think at the moment, the rate of interest that the government of the UK needs to pay on their IOUs is around about 5% on a 30-year bond. The equivalent Bund in Germany, it's 2.8%, 2.9%.
I was about to say, I think it's somewhere around 3. Yeah.
Doesn't sound like a big difference in terms of, but actually, proportionally speaking, that's like an extra. It's going to cost a third more to do the same stuff. And a gilt, just to follow on after that, the reason it's called a gilt is I don't know, probably still do this, but definitely 150, 200 years ago, and there's a British Empire, and they were still selling such things, that IOU would be gilt edged. So it would have nice gold kind of leaf on the side. It would be a gilt. And you could tell that was a UK government bond because it was gilt edged, hence the gilt. So there you go. GILT, not GUILT. So that is the gilt.
Ah,
Explained it, but ultimately, what that then means kicking down the line is if it costs more money for the UK government to borrow than a competitor nation, what might
yeah.
that mean? Well, they've got to borrow more, it costs them more, they've got to tax you more to pay for it. The second largest expenditure on like UK PLC, the most expensive thing we pay for is the NHS. And the
Mm.
second most expensive is, get your head around this, just the interest on the money that we owe. That isn't going down. That isn't going down. It's like an interest-only mortgage. I promise to pay you back the principal in a long time, and I'll just pay the interest. What's actually happening now, today, in the Bank of England and the Treasury, is they will be repaying debt from 20 years ago. Think of it like a mortgage. You're switching your mortgage rate to a different provider. It's like somebody going from a 1% mortgage to a 6% mortgage. But you get no more stuff for your money, do you? You still got the same house. You're just having to pay more to live there. And I think, as an analogy, that's as close as I can get to going, if it gets more expensive for the government to borrow money, they're going to have to find some other ways to get money in, like putting taxes up, or decide not to spend money on other things. But they've already established that those are things that they're not really prepared to do.
Stephen,
Hmm.
we have established through season 1 and the lost episode, the Deuce tapes, that I'm not allowed to deal with any of our finances in this household because I'm not very good at it. My wife, thankfully, takes care of everything, and that's why all is good. The way you just described the financial planning of governments is the way I try and explain financial planning plans that I have that I think could work to my wife, who then looks at me in horror and says, absolutely not. So why we just borrow it, not pay it back for like 30 years, be grand. I don't know where I'll be in 30 years, probably, Panama. Um, but, how did we get into this situation? And I realize I've just asked you one of the most complex questions ever, but has it always been like this? And is there something specific about the bond markets at the moment that they are becoming something that we hear about? And basically, who's responsible for this? Somebody should be responsible for that, right?
I take full responsibility. I mean, yes, Peter, that was one of the most difficult questions you'd like me to answer. If we're focused just on the UK rather than just kind of Western capital,
Yeah.
because America's situation is almost the same. The difference with America, this is you dragging me into becoming an economist, which I'm definitely not, right? But the difference with America is they do something crazy, like actually grow, like their economy grows. So every year, and that's why it's different. Our personal finances, yes, if you kept spending more than you earned, eventually you would go bankrupt. And I guess the difference with a country and a government is you can also, not to get difficult concepts here, you can expand the economy, you can do all kinds of different things. So it isn't exactly the same as our personal finances. But we have got ourselves in a position where we're effectively, if you did look at it like that, are living beyond our means.
Mm.
And then everything's a political choice. So it's a political choice to remove the two-child benefit cap. And actually, I'm not here to critique that there's people who need help, but it's a definite choice to do that when we also need to spend more money on defence. But then there's also all these different things. The governments, there's a huge kind of debate, I suppose, about how we actually, specifically in the UK, are we kind of ungovernable as people? Because we want everything. We basically want the moon. We want all of these things. Don't
Well,
tax me.
you say it. You want them. They want the moon
The
on a
moon on a
stick.
stick. Well, yeah, we do voters. That's what voters want. But then because of such short termism, that hence, I don't know, hence the rise of populism. We are getting a bit too deep here.
We are gonna be going into the politics, the big politics stories in the next part. Don't worry, we'll get there. But before we stray too far from this, so we've established why those markets are important. We've established what bonds are, what gilt is, not gilt. When you say it, I think that was the U and the I difference. Gilt and gilt. This has a big impact on how me, you, and the people listening and watching to this can apply for refinancing of their homes and everything like that, any big loans. So even though this is government borrowing, it has a direct impact on our borrowing, personal finance borrowing as well. We're already seeing mortgage rates very high in the UK. Would this push those rates higher? And then if that does that, well, I mean, the simple and stupid question is, what does that mean for people paying it? Well, Peter, it means they're paying more money or they have to find more money. But really, what does it mean for people coming in to see you or people looking not just for their house, but for their whole personal finance package? So, Stephen, what are we staring down the barrel of? Are things terrible or can they get worse? I feel like that question was asked to Mick McCarthy all those years ago. Honestly, he said, it can't go on like this, can it? It can.
So one thing to pick up on what you've said there is you said interest rates in the UK are really high right now. I mean, that's subjective, I would suggest. I think if you
I said mortgage rates are high right now.
Well, mortgage rates and savings rates, potato, I suppose, to a certain extent. Historically, the last 20 years post the credit crisis, interest rates have been super low, like based on the last 200 years, 0.5%, really, really low. If you stretch it back, look at an average Bank of England base rate around about 4%, around about 4.5%, 5%. That's the average over 100 odd years. We've just been used to super, super low interest rates, right? So that doesn't change the fact that people have then borrowed accordingly and lived potentially beyond their means, and now they're going to feel the squeeze. So I think that's the first thing. Those gilts that we talked about, it's important to explain how that works and links to mortgages, I think, before I explain that any further. So banks also need to borrow money. So the Bank of England base rate does affect the mortgage rate, but actually banks lend and borrow money from each other as well. So I guess an analogy would be if you have, I don't know, a coffee shop, a cafe, and all of a sudden the price of coffee beans doubles, what would happen to the price of coffee?
It would have to go up.
So mortgage is exactly the same. If money becomes more expensive for banks to lend to each other because of the Bank of England base rate, that's what affects the mortgage rates going up. And all of that ties right back around to what we talked about at the beginning, inflation as well. So that is the distinctive link, and it's almost like a death spiral, really. If life gets more expensive and money gets more expensive, well, they need to put the rates up. And then that has the knock-on effect over here as well. So that's the reality. Mortgage rates will remain at the same level, if not creep up higher, if those yields, the rate at which pension companies and investors buy those bonds from the bond market, if that continues to grow, Bank of England base rate goes up, cost of mortgages goes up, and your mortgage is going to be more expensive. Then I think you then say, well, what should I do now, Stephen? Everybody's situation is going to be different, so you just need to look at my wife, the other side of the business. She's a bank manager without being tied to a bank. She's a commercial bank manager. So we can't change light bulbs or anything, but most things with a pound sign we might have a basher trying to help with. But she quite often says to somebody, clients don't often remember the interest rate, they remember the payment. If you ask them what do they pay on the mortgage, they go about £1,200. You need to scratch a bit further for them to realise that interest rate was 4.1 or 3.8. So what I normally ask people to do is to step back and look at their overall finances and go, what do you pay for the mortgage? And then when we come to do the rate switch, or we look at how the next house, again, look at the pounds and pence part and see what effect that will have. So we can kind of model out, well, if it went up by 0.25%, it would be £30 more expensive. What would that mean to your life? Well, I might need to give up X. If you then get to the point where it's going up by £500 a month and there's no more money at the end of the month, then that's when people are talking about possibly downsizing and selling. At the same time, everybody else is looking to do the same thing, though, right? So all of this kind of filters in. I don't want to make it too catastrophic. That
Don't worry, we're going to talk about the Labour Party in part 2, so it'll get catastrophic then.
I think the question you said was what would I be talking to clients about? And I think what I would say is look at your overall finances from an income and expenditure perspective, and try to think, if my mortgage payment went up by £200 a month, what difference would that make in my life? And if you start getting ahead of that now, it won't be a shock if indeed that does happen when your rate comes up in 6 months, 18 months' time. So no magic wand, unfortunately, Peter. Everybody was in a good mood.
Yeah, no magic wand, but it does seem, and this is exactly the reason why we do this show, Stephen, is because the actions of politicians, we've just seen how these have had direct impacts right the way through. Not even politicians in our own country. I mean, Donald Trump, the US president, starting this one, but how that filters through in the actions of British politicians, how that ultimately impacts right down to our personal finances. Go on then. Let's go and talk about the Labour Party. So, yes, the Labour Party eating themselves again, really. Let's face it, if you look at the party's history, it's not looking good for Keir Starmer. He is still Prime Minister as we speak, but tanks are moving onto his lawn, it would seem, and they're moving with an increased pace. And we expect Wes Streeting, probably by the time you're listening to this, to have announced that he's quitting as Health Secretary and he is going to run against Keir Starmer. It's all getting very tense, isn't it, Stephen?
Quite a bit going on yesterday, Peter, with Keir Starmer, Wes Streeting. How serious is this for Keir Starmer, the pressure building on him?
It's incredibly serious. I would go as far as, certainly in the role of Prime Minister, to say that Keir Starmer is cooked at the moment. He's absolutely done. I think that means something different with the youth these days, doesn't it? But never mind. We're just going to blow past it. His goose is cooked. That's what I was trying to go for. We understand that Wes Streeting's 19-minute sojourn into Downing Street on Wednesday morning was pretty much to tell him, Keir, I'm jacking in the morning and I'm going to run against you. And then out. So it does seem like that is what's going to happen, that he's going to trigger this leadership battle and whatever comes next. Still no word from Keir Starmer if he's going to stand and fight it, because he can. The constitution of the Labour Party isn't as set up to oust a leader like the Conservative Party is, where they've just got to put a number of letters into the 1922 committee, and if there's enough, there's a vote. It's a bit more tricky with the Labour Party. Also, let's bear in mind, this becomes considerably tricky once this is sorted, because all of these Labour politicians were very vocal in their attack. Even though it's completely within the Constitution, they would be completely within their right to elect a new leader and they become Prime Minister. They went too hard on the Tories on the you can't just become Prime Minister. Who voted for you? And it will come back. And in some sense, I really agree with what the Labour politicians were saying at that time. You can't just say, well, he's rubbish. It's all fallen apart. Oh, by the way, this is the new guy and we're going to put him in because we can't trust you to correctly vote for a new leader of the country. It feels undemocratic to me. It feels wrong. And I would hope that they didn't do it. However, that would ultimately lead to instability, followed by major instability of a national general election. When I said, his future as Prime Minister, his goose was cooked, I was very careful about saying that, because if it is Wes Streeting, who would be the continuity candidate essentially, I would not rule out the offer of a job in a Wes Streeting cabinet for Keir Starmer. There you go.
Wow.
I would not rule it out, and I would almost certainly suggest that job would be Foreign Secretary. I beg your pardon.
That is the part where he just seemed much more comfortable in his own skin, going across to talk to Zelensky in Ukraine, never mind falling out with Donald Trump. But those big
He handled himself
moment. Yeah.
amicably in China. It wasn't, devastatingly great. Nobody who I spoke to could say his name, but they knew who he was by his face. So it is a possibility. However, a lot of that would depend on Keir Starmer's own ego. A lot of it would depend because he's going to accept, not going upstairs. He's not going to be become Kenny Dalglish and disappear up there. But then again, he also doesn't want to be Gerard Houllier, to keep it with the Liverpool footballing reference and come in as the co-manager with Roy Hodgson. And like, how does it work? So that could be a solution. It would also lead to an easier transition of power. Yeah. If Starmer was to come out and go, I back Wes to be... I'm getting it in because I might not be able to do it next week. I back Wes to be the new Prime Minister. He will be great. In fact, there's actually a tweet kicking about that I saw from the last time there was a... am I right with this? Last time there was a leadership election. There's something out there. There's a tweet that's doing the rounds where just from Starmer saying, I back Wes Streeting fully as leader. Yeah. And so, that could happen. However, it's not going to be a one-horse race because the left of the Labour Party they're furious with the current status quo. They want a big upheaval. They feel like the promises that a lot of them made, particularly the 2024 intake, the promises they made on the doorsteps, not only are they not happening, it's going wildly against what their electorates are saying to them. And their constituency.
It was interesting. It was interesting that so many of that new intake you're talking about as well, it seems that they got there under the Keir Starmer banner, and a lot of them are the ones who get the first 80 people who are resigning and saying that you should kind of step down. And I guess Starmer wouldn't have thought that. They would have, I've got you. You're here because of me.
Yeah.
And it's
under normal circumstances, this would be extraordinary to have so many from the most recent intake immediately lining up to stab the boss in the back. Would Keir Starmer not have expected this? I don't know, because if you look at it, he did pretty much the same thing. He got into a position under Jeremy Corbyn despite having barely an agreeable moment with Jeremy Corbyn on policy. So, yeah, of course he'll expect it. It also needs to be remembered that while this was a wide victory for Labour, it was a very shallow victory. A lot of constituencies, including the one I vote in, I got that vote back in these elections. It's Horton and Sunderland South. David Cameron stripped me of my right to vote as somebody who lives overseas. It was returned at the last election. Thank you very much. So anyway, I got to vote there. That was usually a huge majority win for Labour. It shrunk massively. So it's a wide victory, but a shallow one, because those majorities, they're not very deep at all. So yeah, I can definitely see people lining up to stab him in the back right now, and I think there'll be more and more to come. It's when you get into those candidates or potential candidates from the left of the party that it starts worrying the type of people we've been speaking about in the first part of the show. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, the famous quote, do you know what? Let's not do the King of the North first. Let's do him second. Let's talk about Angela Rayner, who's being tipped at the moment. Now, if you were to believe my little birds in London, colleagues and friends in my game who are working on this story at the moment, Angela Rayner and Andy Burnham met in London yesterday, and there's been some kind of meeting going on. Perhaps they'll strike the equivalent of the modern day Blair-Brown deal. Yes, so we don't know if how the meeting went or anything that came from it, but it would seem that Angela Rayner is being touted as a potential leader by some sections of the Labour Party. I don't know Angela personally. She's not one of the politicians that I've had any big amounts of contact with. But people who I do know very well have worked with her and interviewed her in various different capacities over the years and speak very highly of her. I just don't think, if what we were talking about, a potential role for Keir Starmer being foreign minister in a Wes Streeting government and how that might work if everything would fall in place, that Angela Rayner leading Britain internationally would go down very well, particularly when you look at how far right our key allies are. Not sure how that would work. As a second in command, I thought she did all right at that until it came out that her tax affairs were about as bad as mine if I was allowed to do them myself. So there's still issues there. about her tax affairs that haven't been sorted out properly yet. So her running for the leadership, I'd have questions about that. However, and we have to talk about him because everybody has done, the Mayor of Manchester, the King in the North, Andy Burnham, not an MP. For the love of God, people, if you're wanting this sorted out quickly and you're wanting it sorted out right, Andy Burnham's not the person to do it. If you're wanting Keir Starmer to say, I will linger on in agony until September, Andy Burnham's your man to do it. And at every point, Keir Starmer could say, actually, no, I'm not going to go, and I'm pulling his right to stand in any, any by-election.
Can he do that?
Can he do it? Can he stop him from? Can he pull it? Yeah.
It's these are the questions I want to ask you, I suppose, about you mentioned, I didn't say the men in grey suits, but yeah, Conservatives, they've got this down to a pat, right? That this is how you do it. You get rid of them. There's so many votes. But this Labour NEC thing, does he have the casting vote? Because if the deputy leader, she seems to have an awful lot of sway as well. So
it could ultimately be decided by the Home Secretary, and she's not been in favour of Sir Keir. Might as well give him full titles because honestly, I think he's done, and he'll be. We might not even be talking about him next week. But anyway, she might not give Sir Keir the backing. It certainly doesn't sound like she's going to give Sir Keir the backing he would need. As I understand it, he does have a vote that he can say no. He does kind of have a veto on that, but it's more of a guiding hand, as I get it, more than you're all going to vote this way. So he could do that. And he could stop Andy Burnham. But as far as I understand, Keir Starmer and Starmer's team and the cabinet secretary was on the radio again this morning saying what a wonderful job Andy's doing in Manchester. And he signed up to do that job for the people of Manchester, and they want him to stay there. And as long as they're happy, we're happy. You know, that type of stuff. So yeah, a bit of it is, and it's quite frustrating to me because, you know, as a journalist, I don't get to talk about my own political leanings in any way because it wouldn't be right. I try not to do it too much on here, but really, this left of centre-y, media lovey type centrist dad that, you know, type person. I am, and you know, I know where I can accept when I'm wrong with it, but there are bits that I like with it. I can see why they have kind of gone, oh, we want somebody new and he's the new guy. And it's because he's not tarnished by this current debacle.
Yeah.
That's why. When he was Andy Burnham is somebody who a lot of my friends in journalism, in media and in politics, if I have any friends in politics, I'm not sure I really do, probably a couple, most of them retired now. But those people that work with him and do lots of stuff with Andy Burnham in Manchester, big supporters of him, big fans of him. Don't think he gets everything right, but he's a very good communicator. Yeah, he does seem to tick a lot of boxes, but he's been around being a minister before.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't really do out.
Didn't have the top job though. Didn't have the ability. He didn't have the sway to do what he wanted to do. I mean, from back to try to link it back round to the money and stuff with bonds and interest rates and things. The least it would appear the least offensive of the runners and riders to the bond markets. This is not politics. I'm just saying, would be Wes Streeting the closest to that version of a soft left new Labour kind of a worldview. The Andy Burnham and Angela Rayner's version, even though a lot of the stuff I can get on board with in terms of what their vision of the UK would look like. Directly, though, Andy Burnham had said not 2 months ago, why are we in hock to the bond markets? Why do we? Well,
it was his quote there and his clear lack of understanding of that, which prompted my questions to you earlier, Stephen, because I wanted our viewers to understand that, our listeners and viewers to understand that as I do now, ahead of talking about why that was a dumb thing to say.
And dumb, assuming that it was really dumb, or did he not really understand? Did Angela really understand? I mean, that's a different conversation altogether. Ultimately, there's a version of their politics that if you do spend more and you invest in infrastructure and all these things, we can then grow, right? So it can happen. But in the short term where we're at the moment, the actual effects, like I said, the second highest bill that we spend as a country after the NHS is the interest that just to service the existing debt we've already got. So if that's the second biggest expenditure, you kind of got to be kind of aware of it. And that's the reason why we're not in hock to the bond markets. Just you can't opt out of the system. So whether, again, with most people, you'll tell me this, they come in with all of the ideas and what they're going to do. When they actually get into the seat of power, will they be still doing the same things? Or once they have the ability, does the reality kind of, the constraints, that's another show, the constraints are actually running the country from a civil service perspective, the people who are really running things, well, you can't actually do that, there's a lot to be said about the country is difficult to govern because it's difficult to govern. You can't do all the things you want to do when you're doing like the student politics on the outside. When you're in the middle of it, there are real restrictions, I guess.
Talking about difficult to govern, I'm going to throw a name at you that we haven't mentioned yet in any context with this. The wild man of the current Starmer cabinet. Is he tough enough? Hell yes, he's tough enough. It's not David. It's not even Steve. It's Ed Miliband.
Yeah.
So, yes, it does seem he might be the kingmaker behind the scenes, or certainly the Iago type figure, if we're going to get Shakespearean, in the current Starmer cabinet. He seems to have been moving behind, nixing quite a lot of ideas that were going around there. Could Ed make a return to trying to be Labour leader? Could we see the Ed Stone Mark II in the Rose Garden?
Would it be him as a chancellor? That's the actual question, because he could be a chancellor on a number of them, and he seems to be really, really, really wedded to this net zero thing. And honestly, we're going to probably haven't got time to do. We're going to talk about green parties and things, but that.
Well, I can dip into a little bit of Green Party stuff. There is, we had a similar thing here in Germany, and now I could definitely see in whoever leads the next government an Ed Miliband promotion to one of the great offices of state, and ideally, considering what I'm about to tell you about what happened here in Germany, I would think it would be the Treasury, because we had a similar situation when the Greens got into coalition here in Germany. It was Robert Habeck, who was the deputy leader, joint leader, I beg your pardon, of the Green Party, who became the Minister for the Economy, which he then made a super ministry of the Ministry for the Economy and Climate Neutral. Now, what I can tell you is it was a disaster. Because when you start having ideological policies like, and there's nothing wrong with green energy, there's nothing wrong with green technology, a big fan of it completely, and renewable techs, because we need it, because we're seeing, whenever we see fuel crisis, we don't have the power to generate our lives today, and if we can generate from renewables, absolutely brilliant, do it. But when that is your main red line, the world does not match them. And that's the reason why we've seen 9% inflation on energy bills here in Germany. From the most recent crisis, we're already paying some of the highest energy bills. In Europe, Germany generates over 50% of its energy from renewables. Great. But we're also now using whole loads of coal. I was nearly said shitloads of coal, but that's essentially what it is. We're using shitloads of coal here in Germany. So you're looking at the green stats on one side, and then you've got coal-fired power plants on the other, because the way the ideology drove the policy when it came to energy and the economy. I would have fears of Ed Miliband in charge of the country's purse strings. I think Ed Miliband's a very decent man. I can think of only one occasion I've ever had any real talking to him, and he was really, really nice guy, very smart guy, very intelligent guy. Not for me as Chancellor. I could see him running as Prime Minister, and I think if he had the right team around him, maybe it would work. It would also, a lot of it's going to come down to who's got the balls where. Does Keir Starmer have the balls to, just gone with the swears, this one's getting an explicit one. So does Keir Starmer have the stones, we'll call it? Does Keir Starmer have the stones to perhaps take a demotion and become foreign minister to make an easy transition? No. Does Ed Miliband have the stones to face up to all of the criticism and everything that came from the last time he did it, to run for Labour leader again? And perhaps they obviously this time become prime minister. I could see the latter. Of him trying to become prime minister more than I can see him being a success as a chancellor. but that is just me giving predictions on things, which, you know, I have got no basis other than my gut feeling and a little bit of knowledge about what they're like on the inside.
I think all of this stuff actually back to the money bit, back to the bud. All of it just makes you feel a little bit sick in your mouth, just at what we must look like to the rest of the world in terms of stability. Does Keir Starmer register? If you're in Germany, who's the Prime Minister of the UK? Would the regular man go, I don't know, Boris Johnson? Like, would they know?
Does Keir Starmer cut through? That's an interesting one. I reckon if I went out onto the street right now outside the house and I asked everybody who the British Prime Minister was, I would think I'm going to say 50% say Boris Johnson.
Well, there you go.
And there you go. But then that's not because of Germans don't pay attention to anything that's going on. He doesn't cut through.
Yeah.
And while internationally, in some cases, I think probably more Americans would know because he's been on their TV more often when he's spoken about different things in the White House. Yeah.
Probably not.
No, probably not.
No, and so back to the stability thing. We would like something to feel like there is some stability. However, there isn't, and the worries I've got are around what's going to happen from a taxation perspective. What a lurch, and it would be, wouldn't it? A significant, because whoever gets in or lets it wedge straight in is selling. Look, I'm definitely not Keir Starmer, and we're definitely not what's come for the last 14 years. This is our chance with a huge supermajority to do a whole boatload of stuff, and then in comes 60% rate attack. All this, there will be huge changes, and then who's waiting in the wings just 2.5 years later, maybe even less. We've got the general election with Reform versus the Greens for whatever mess ends up with. So, yeah, at the beginning you said, do people have to worry? I went, oh, it'll be fine. I'm sure. It'll be okay. Maybe. I don't know. We'll find
and
out.
That tone, listeners, is why he is the housewife's favourite. Yes, to sum it up, it's a mess right now. It will be a mess for a little while. And what we get down the line of whether it's the right thing for the country or another mess, we're only going to know once Labour's latest internecine conflict is over, or not even Labour, once the latest internecine conflict in British politics is over. Only then will we know who the last man or woman standing really is going to be. That's our show, Season 2, up and running. Thanks very much, Stephen.
Oh, you're welcome. It's lovely to see you after such a long period of time.
Yes, indeed. And thank you very much to you, the listeners and viewers. We'll be back every week and you can get in touch with us about anything, really. Anything you hear on the show, anything you want to see coming up, and, well, anything else on your mind, let's face it. You can do that through social media. Instagram, TikTok's the best. The links of how to find us on there are in the show notes. Also in the show notes is a link that you can buy tickets for a live event that I'm going to be part of. That's at the Fire Station in Sunderland on May the 23rd. It's a live podcast record for the WTF Sunderland podcast. That's the football show I do where we talk about all things Sunderland AFC. That'll be at the Fire Station in Sunderland on the 23rd of May. We've got special guest Carlos Edwards, of course, who scored that fantastic, I'm going to say, thunder bastard. He's got a foot like a traction engine. Carlos is coming down. He's great fun. You'll have a fantastic time with him. We've also got other special guests as well. Come along, buy those tickets. The link is in the bottom. Shameless plug done. Stephen just bids to say bye-bye. See you next week.
Bye-bye. See you soon.